All right, hello everyone. Welcome to International Sports Hub's first NFL podcast. I'm Daniel Zimmermann, ISH Founder, and I'm joined by two of our NFL writers today, Grant Thomas and Hank Stichter. Grant, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Grant Thomas. I'm a senior in high school this year. I'm a big Washington sports fan. Uh, NFL is going to be really interesting this year. A lot of players vying for that number one spot in fantasy, and a lot of teams have the ability to come out of the bottom of divisions and be sleepers. So I'm really excited for this year.
All right, next up we have Hank Stichter.
Hey Daniel. So I'm Hank. I live in Charlotte. Big fan of the Carolina teams as well as the Ohio teams up there. Mostly the Cleveland ones, which I heard at times. But it's gonna be an interesting year in the NFL for sure, with a bunch of free agency moves and draft additions. So we'll see how it plays out.
All right, first topic today is sleeper picks to shine this year, both in fantasy and real NFL. So these are players that we think are going to shine. They could shine for your fantasy teams, or they could just be some of the top performers in the NFL. Hank, why don't you walk us through one or two of your main guys today?
All right. Well, first of all, I think that Amir Abdullah and Carlos Hyde both taking starting roles in their offenses is going to be a big deal, especially Abdullah. Abdullah plays very similarly to Reggie Bush, who was in Detroit 2 seasons ago, well, and last season, but not as much success last season as we saw 2 seasons ago when he was able to put up that 1,000-yard rushing season, as well as catching a lot of passes from Matthew Stafford out of the backfield. Abdullah is going to give them that quickness and receiving ability out of the backfield that we saw him do in Nebraska and so far in the preseason. Carlos Hyde, same thing, taking over for Frank Gore. Plays very similarly to Gore. Has good speed, but can really pound the ball right up the middle when you want him to.
Problem with Hyde will be Reggie Bush is actually coming over from Detroit and joining him in the San Fran backfield. So
Yeah.
he may vulture a few touches, but other than that, I think it should be fine.
Yeah, and I think that Bush is going to serve as more of a receiving back, but you're going to see Hyde with getting the goal line touches mainly, since he has that power that Bush lacks.
Yeah.
Plus, he hasn't had the injuries that Bush has had, so we may see a fully healthy back in San Francisco this year in Hyde.
Going back to Abdullah, I know after the preseason game between the Jets and Lions the other day, the Jets head coach compared Abdullah to Barry Sanders, the Lions legend. That's some pretty
Yeah, I
high
heard.
praise. Um,
I mean, he's obviously not near Barry Sanders yet. I mean, playing one preseason game, but he
yeah.
definitely has the quickness Sanders has. And I mean, it's really too soon to tell what he's going to end up being, but that's definitely high praise for playing one preseason game.
Grant, what about you? Who do you have sleeping this year?
Well, I'd like to stay away from rookies for sleepers because, yeah, they're rookies and people don't know as much about them as some of the veterans in the league. But the sleepers that are veterans that have been in the league for a while, that may have switched teams or are getting smaller roles, people don't expect as much out of them. LeGarrette Blount and Andre Johnson. LeGarrette Blount with the Patriots now after being with the Steelers for a couple of years. New England lost both Ridley and Vereen, and without Brady for the first 4 games, he should get even more touches. And if he performs well, that could give Belichick more confidence in him for the rest of the year. So I could see him getting a lot of touches in New England. And Andre Johnson, not really known as a sleeper pick. He was one of the elite fantasy options at receiver in his years with the Texans, but finally having consistent QB play in Indianapolis with Andrew Luck for a receiver like Johnson can do wonders. And he's taking over for Reggie Wayne, who caught, or was targeted, rather, 116 times last year, which is a lot. And for Johnson, he loves getting targeted a lot. He can catch all kinds of balls, very tall. so he can fit really well in with that Colts offense.
Agreed. I have two main guys, both wide receivers coming into new offenses. I really like what Jeremy Maclin did last year in Philly. I thought he was a top-notch guy. And now coming over to Kansas City, maybe less of a powerful offense, but still, Alex Smith has been looking for a go-to guy for quite some time. I think Maclin could be that. I wouldn't be surprised if Maclin has a Pro Bowl year and is a good wide receiver one in fantasy football this year. And my other guy is Kenny Stills coming in the Miami offense that looks to be very high-powered. Ryan Tannehill should have plenty of options with Greg Jennings, Jarvis Landry, Rashard Matthews, but I do think Kenny Stills coming over from the Saints is going to have quite the year with his speed and his youth. I think he could be a big sleeper pick in fantasy this year. Next up, there's always the debate who's the top quarterback. Why don't you guys name off who you would say top 3 fantasy football quarterbacks would be?
Well, I mean, you got to look at Rodgers and Luck, and they're by far the top two. I mean, they're in a tier of their own up there. But and then there's a lot of question at 3, whether it's Cam Newton, if he can stay healthy this season, Peyton Manning, if he can stay healthy. Is it going to be Roethlisberger, Stafford, Rivers? Are they going to be consistent? And then you look at the aging guys like Brady, Breeze, and if they're just going to be able to hold up in their old age now.
Agreed. What about you, Grant?
Well, I definitely agree with Rodgers and Luck. But number 3, I actually think it's going to be Big Ben. I mean, he has one of the best, or maybe the best, receiving cores in Pittsburgh he's ever had. He had that 6-touchdown game last year, and I can see that happening again this year. He's old reliable. He's 33 years old this year. He's in his 12th year in the league. But he's always had a decent offensive line, and that's still the same this year. I could see him kind of surprising some people this year at number 3, and I think because Cam Newton's offensive line isn't very good, it's probably better in Pittsburgh, but the receiving core that Big Ben has is a lot better than Newton's, so I'd put him at number 3.
I agree that Cam Newton's offensive line is a bit shaky, but I do think the Panthers made some improvements this offseason trying to address that. So I'm confident with putting Cam Newton at 3. I just think his versatility as a runner, as a playmaker, he's that guy who's going to get you a first down no matter what, and I think he's a safe bet at number 3.
If he can stay
Yeah, health is a big issue. I know he missed his first game ever last year, so we'll see if that health can keep up this year. So next up, there's a lot of teams who got better. Hard to tell who got worse. Who do you guys think is going to compete for that number 1 pick in next year's draft as the worst record this season?
Well, I'll go first on this one. I think it's the Redskins at this point. Niles Paul and Silas Redd, both big pieces. Paul, vying for that number 1 tight end spot, is out for the season after a ankle fracture in the first 5 minutes of the first preseason game on Thursday. And Silas Redd, the number 2 or 3 running back, he's also out for the year. So those are 2 big pieces that they'll be without. RG3 hasn't shown so far in his career that he can be confident in the pocket. His mechanics are still out of whack. And the offensive line does get a little bit better with Brandon Scherf, but they're probably going to play him at tackle, which with his small arms and his speed isn't very good on the edge, so he can allow a good amount of sacks. And I just don't see this team going anywhere defensively, offensively. I don't see any team that's worse at this point.
Hank, what about you?
Well, obviously the Jaguars are always in contention for it, but I think 2 teams that not many people are expecting or haven't expected up until this point are the 49ers and the Saints. The Saints obviously losing big pieces in Jimmy Graham and Junior Gillette, both leaving. Kenny Stills leaving. Drew Brees, Marquise Colston, both aging. Running back has always been a question whether anyone can stay healthy or perform at a high level, do both in the same season. A lot of people are saying Mark Ingram could, but he has faced injury problems in the past, and so that's still a big question. The 49ers, you look at them, they're just depleted, losing Patrick Willis due to retirement, Alden Smith, obviously, and you look at even Chris Borland, who is an up-and-comer for him at middle linebacker, retiring due to his worry for his health later in life. And so really, those are just two teams that have been powerhouses in the past and have just become depleted all of a sudden. So it's going to be interesting to see how they're going to be able to rebound or if they can.
Yeah, losing Frank Gore, that's going to sting a bit, as you mentioned, that defense. So I also think the 49ers will struggle as a team. But the Texans signing Brian Hoyer, and with Ryan Mallett and Brian Hoyer competing for that starting job, I don't see how either of them are going to lead them to success. Also losing Arian Foster for the first possibly 6 to 8 weeks of the season, that's a huge blow. That offense lost Andre Johnson, and I just don't see how DeAndre Hopkins and Jalen Strong can fill that offense to actually compete against NFL defenses. That defense has always been relatively strong, but I don't see that defense winning them more than 4 games this year. And also the Titans, I think there's a lot of change going on in Tennessee with Marcus Mariota coming in, but I don't see them competing this year or next year until Mariota or Zach Mettenberger take the reins of that team and really figure out what they're going for. Because right now, after their first preseason game, they look scrambled, and I don't see how they can really make it out of this season all right.
Yeah,
All right,
the
let's move.
Titans are playing with a lot of new pieces and a lot of youth, so it's going to be interesting to see how they're going to be able to develop and play as a unit, just pretty much starting from scratch this season. So.
True. All right, let's move on to bold predictions. Grant, what's your boldest prediction?
I could see that the Patriots will flounder to the first 4 games without Brady and just the distractions around the team. It's very possible. Brady is a great quarterback, but the defense did lose some guys. The offense did lose some guys as well. They're coming off a Super Bowl win, but at quarterback, it's very out in the open for the first 4. And if they do lose all those four games, it could ruin the chemistry and around the team for the rest of the year. Not very likely, but it could happen. It's always an option. That's probably my boldest prediction for this year.
Yeah, I agree that there's going to be some unsureness out in New England. I would say my boldest prediction is Matt Forte will compete for the all-purpose yardage record. I believe Darren Sproles holds that record. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Darren Sproles holds that record currently. I think Forte is going to be used a lot in this Chicago offense, especially with news that Kevin White may be down for the season. That leaves Chicago with Matt Forte and Alshon Jeffrey as their 2 offensive weapons. And I see Jay Cutler and Mark Trestman going to Matt Forte a lot this year, so much so that he could be competing for a record or 2. Hank, what about you?
I think we could see potentially Tampa Bay as a playoff contender. Jameis Winston's coming in, and he's already loaded with 2 great receivers in Vincent Jackson and Mike Evans. You saw them, they drafted offensive linemen with their next 2-3 picks in the draft to protect Winston, something that we haven't seen out of some of the quarterbacks that have been taken high, like E.J. Manuel, Cam Newton, both players taken very high. Robert Griffin, but they didn't have any linemen to help them get comfortable in the pocket from day one, and I think that now Winston has that, and so he may be able to lead Tampa Bay offense to being a playoff team, considering their defense. They have Levante David, Gerald McCoy. Those two alone can get the job done, plus Alteron Werner, and leading a decent secondary, not the best, but definitely not the worst. So good defense, good offense. Neither are going to be top in the league, but definitely enough that we could potentially see them in the playoffs, especially with the Falcons and Saints kind of falling off in that division.
Yeah, that NFC South is very shaky. I also have a bold prediction involving an NFC South team, but it's not the Buccaneers, it's not the Saints, it's not the Falcons, it's the Panthers. I believe the Panthers will come out of the NFC as the Super Bowl representative. That is bold, but I think this is Cam's year. What do y'all think?
That's probably the boldest set of all of them. The Seahawks will be, and the Packers especially, will be tough to get past. I mean, is the Panthers defense good enough to stop Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Marshawn Lynch, Eddie Lacy? I don't see it.
I don't know. I think that defense has been great every year with their no-name safeties, no-name cornerbacks. But Luke Kuechly is one of the best offensive leaders in the league, and I think that signing of Charles Tillman is really going to help Carolina, not just from what Tillman can do on the field, but as a veteran presence in what's been a young secondary for most of Cam Newton's career. Another bold prediction I have is Jeremy Hill in Cincinnati. I know Giovanni Bernard was supposed to be the next big thing when he got there, but Jeremy Hill came in last year and he really he impressed, to say the least. And I believe he will become a perennial first-round fantasy pick in the years to come after this season. I think he's going to blow people's minds off, and I really think Hill is going to be one of the top fantasy running backs this year. What do you guys think?
I could definitely see him as one of the best running backs in the league this year. It still raises question for me, him sharing the backfield with Giovanni Bernard, if he's going to be able to put up stats like he did last year with both of them back there. So I think it really depends on Bernard's health and how Bernard plays, more even just as much as how Hill plays, because it'll limit his touches and he won't see as much time if Bernard's playing at his full potential as well.
Agreed. Does anyone else have some bold predictions they'd like to share? Grant, what about your Marvin Lewis prediction? Hank, you there?
Yeah.
What about you? Do you have any predictions?
Well, I think that we could see one of the first undefeated teams, regular season that is, in the Colts or the Packers. You look at the Colts, obviously just ramping things up on offense with the additions of Frank Gore and Andre Johnson. Plus Andrew Luck progressing another year, going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I mean, that's going to be an unstoppable offense. The question is going to lie in the defense. See if Robert Mathis, Trent Cole, many veteran players, see if they can hold up for an entire season. And then Packers are the same way. You have Aaron Rodgers, Eddie Lacy, Devontae Adams, Randall Cobb, Jordy Nelson. I mean, they're loaded on offense. Special teams, you have Randall Cobb returning kicks and punts, and he's one of the best returners in the league. But once again, question lies on defense. It's going to be if Clay Matthews is going to be able to play at a high level again.
They
And
do have BJ Raji back this year.
they do have that. It just worries me their breakdown versus the Seahawks. I know we mentioned that, or you mentioned that in the first podcast. But at 12, they were up 12 points with 4 minutes to go and ended up losing that game. And I mean that's part of the offense fault, but I mean a lot of it falls on the defense. But I think there's a lot of youth there. Progressing another season, you're going to see Clinton Dix perform at a high level potentially.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think either the Colts or the Packers could go undefeated.
Definitely, there's a chance. Grant, what about you? Do you have any? I know you mentioned Marvin Lewis.
Yeah, I think Andy Dalton, based on the way he played last season, could regress even more this year. And Jeremy Hill definitely is a bright spot there. I believe he led in the second half last year, led all running backs in yardage. But if that doesn't work out, Andy Dalton, I think, is almost a sure thing of not working out at this point. Marvin Lewis has been there since 2003. So he's had a long tenure there, and he hasn't really gotten anywhere. And I think this could be the year that he gets the boot.
Definitely, there's a chance. That's a long time to go without much playoff success. So it's a big rookie class this year. Lots of big-name players at skill positions. Who would you say is the top rookie at running back? Because, I mean, the debate between Winston and Mariota has kind of been settled, with Winston going number 1 overall. But I think running back has a lot of big names: Melvin Gordon, Abdullah, Todd Gurley. So Grant, who would you say is the top rookie running back?
Well, Gurley and Gordon have gotten all the hype, but I believe T.J. Yeldon might be the guy at this point. He's going to get a lion's share of carries in Jacksonville because he's by far and away the number 1 running back there, and he can do everything well. And he's shown that he can find success in a zone scheme, and he projects to get around 250 carries. For that, as a rookie, could do wonders for him. And the O-line he'll have won't be nearly as good as it was at Alabama, but I think he could come through and be that number 1 as far as yardage, carries, and even yardage per carry at the end of the year.
Definitely, there's a chance. I also noticed that you have Dorial Green-Beckham at wide receiver as a possible shiner. That's you, Hank. I totally agree with that. I think Green-Beckham gives Marcus Mariota a giant target. Standing at 6'5", it's going to be hard to guard someone like that. I do think he could be a huge red zone target. Do you agree?
I would agree. I think Green Beckham could be one of the best receivers in this rookie class. It's gonna come down ultimately to how he's gonna behave there. He obviously got kicked out of Missouri, didn't play last season at Oklahoma, but was still drafted second round, I believe. And so, I mean, the fact that he was drafted that highly with off the field issues, especially in this day and age in the NFL, says a lot about his play. Speed is something he's going to have to work on, but he's huge frame, his good hands. He has a lot of potential.
Agreed. Moving on, there's a lot of teams that we mentioned earlier in the podcast that could rise up and surprise everyone, maybe make a run to the playoffs. Who would you guys say are the 2 teams that you are expecting to make the playoffs that many people don't think they will? Hank, why don't you start us off?
Well, I already said my bold prediction on the Buccaneers, but I would say the Vikings and the Jets are both teams we could see in the playoffs. Vikings, they have Adrian Peterson back this year after only playing 1 game last season. So that could do wonders for their offense, give Teddy Bridgewater more time in the pocket, be able to run the play action better. So Teddy Bridgewater could have a big year with Adrian Peterson back. We saw Adrian Peterson pretty much single-handedly lead that team to the playoffs several seasons ago. So we could be in store for that again.
Agreed.
And then in New York, obviously Geno Smith out with a broken jaw. But I think that Ryan Fitzpatrick or even Bryce Petty, rookie out of Baylor, could take control of that offense, especially with Brandon Marshall coming over. You have Eric Decker. Look, I mean, they've been one of the top rushing teams in the league past several seasons. And then you look at their defense: Muhammad Wilkerson, Leonard Williams going to step up. We'll see what happens with Sheldon Richardson. But then
That's one scary defensive line.
Yeah, they have one of the best defensive lines. Damon Harrison. They have one of the best defensive lines in all of football, and so we'll see what's going to happen with that. And so you could see the Jets in the playoffs, especially with Darrelle Revis back too, secondary.
Yeah. I mean, I like the Vikings pick more than the Jets just because of the drama, but I have the Rams actually making it out as a wild card team. I think that defense is, at least name-wise, is one of the most stacked defenses in the league. You know, you got Robert Quinn, Chris Long, Nick Fairley, Michael Brockers, Janoris Jenkins. You know, you got a lot of guys who can make plays on that defense. Ogletree, yep. So I do think the Rams, especially in a division that has tough defenses like Seattle and Arizona, I do think the Rams could make it out of the NFC. And I also think the Chiefs, the Kansas City Chiefs, could, I believe they will win their division and actually beat out the Broncos. The Broncos will slide into a wild card spot, and I think the Chiefs will play one of the best seasons of all the teams in football. I wouldn't be surprised to see 12-4 or 13-3 records for those guys. I think that defense is stacked, and I think Alex Smith is one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the league because every year he does the same thing, very productive. I don't see the Chiefs missing out on this year. What about you, Grant?
I'm just going to go with the Dolphins. As I said earlier, there's a good chance that the Patriots might flounder if they lose all those first 4 games. And the Dolphins, I think, have a higher chance than the Bills of making it out of that division. Lamar Miller, their running back, 1,000 yards last year, over 1,000 yards, and over 5 yards a carry. Still not a top fantasy pick or very popular in NFL circles. But Ryan Tannehill also, I mean, he's a young guy, but he's gotten better and better, similar to Andrew Luck. Not saying that Tannehill is any close to Luck as far as skill, but he's progressed in a similar way based on where his ceiling was projected. But and they also made more moves in free agency than almost any other team on both sides of the ball, making Ndamukong Suh the highest-paid defensive player in NFL history. That's definitely a gamble, as Albert Haynesworth was for the Redskins about 4 or 5 years ago, and that didn't work out for them. But I feel like Suh has a higher chance of working out with a new team. This is pretty exciting for them, and I'm really excited to see the Dolphins. And I also agree with the Rams. Similar to the Dolphins, the Rams have a stacked defense, and offensively, Nick Foles also had some good success in Philadelphia. And if he can continue that in St. Louis, I don't see any reason why they couldn't challenge the Seahawks in that division.
Agreed. All right, wrapping up. 2 big-name free agents are still unsigned, both with a history of legal issues, very well-noted legal issues. Ray Rice and Aldon Smith. Aldon Smith recently released by the 49ers after more legal troubles, and Ray Rice has been a free agent since about week 6 of last season when the Ravens cut ties with him. Do you guys see either of these players being picked up? I know there have been rumors of Rice to the Broncos, Rice to the Texans. Honestly, I don't see anyone taking a gamble on Aldon Smith and his problems. I really don't see anyone wanting to pick up Ray Rice after the the incident with him, and I don't see that being a good look for any team. But did you guys disagree? Do you think either of them will make some real NFL rosters this year?
Well, I mean, I could see, definitely not in the early season, but if a team like the Broncos, who only has really one good running back at this point in C.J. Anderson, Monte Ball has not lived up to expectations. I could see Rice definitely going there. They're a fringe playoff contender, Denver. But if the season does not go exactly to plan and they need a little boost in the backfield, I could see Rice going there. And really to any team that is on the edge of a playoff berth and needs some help on a third down or a fourth down running back, a fourth down, what am I saying? If they have a running back that already can't play all four downs and they need a backup, Rice would be a prime candidate for that. And Aldon Smith, definitely not. He's had way too many problems. Probably one of the more problematic players in the NFL at this point. Multiple DUIs. Other than Rice, who's only had really one incident, Rice is definitely the more likely pickup.
Hank, do you
I would
agree?
agree that neither are going to make a franchise look good in terms of picking them up, but I think that there's a lot of talent there, and some teams ignore the off-the-field issues for talent. You look at teams like the Broncos, Von Miller having issues. You look at they picked up Shane Ray after Ray was projected to fall potentially all the way to the third round with his off-the-field stuff. You look at teams like the Cowboys also not caring as much about off-the-field issues, and so you might see that as both places as potential landing spots for Ray Rice. Neither has a star running back that has proven that they can stay healthy. Cleveland is another destination for Ray Rice, I think, with no starters jumping out. I mean, you have a crowded backfield in Terrence West and Isaiah Crowell, but neither.
Also Duke Johnson, the rookie from Miami.
Duke Johnson too, but from what we've been hearing out of Cleveland is that none of them are jumping out to management as the starting running back at this point. So we could see Ray Rice land in Cleveland. As with Aldon Smith, I think, like Grant said, it depends a lot on injuries. I think one spot potentially could be the Jets. The Jets land him, and they're already probably one of the best front seven in the league. I already talked about that defensive line, plus with the addition of Aldon Smith at linebacker, pass rushing would be a huge step up for them. Both are great players, but obviously have been pretty messed up in the NFL off the field wise. So we'll see what plays out there. I think either would have success if they can stay out of trouble, but it'll all come down to their decisions and the decisions of higher management.
Yep. All right. Well, that about wraps it up today for ISH's NFL podcast. For Grant Thomas and Hank Stichter, I'm Daniel Zimmermann. Thank you for tuning in. Goodbye.